A telephone call without a SIM card, without network towers, and without monthly charges sounds like fantasy. Yet it is already real in Africa. In a world where powerful telecommunications companies dominate with costly contracts, one young man from Namibia decided to resist. Simon Petrus, only 29 years old, built a device that bypasses the system and promises freedom for millions who have been excluded. Could this invention become the seed of a new communication era, or will it be silenced by vested interests? Stay with us, subscribe, and share this turning point in African history. The story of Simon Petrus begins in a small Namibian town, far from the research laboratories and polished campuses usually associated with technological breakthroughs. As a boy, he displayed unusual curiosity, dismantling old radios and salvaging discarded electronics. Instead of toys, he held wires and circuit boards in his hands, trying to understand how they worked. Over time, his room became a laboratory of sorts, filled with improvised tools and recycled parts. Without grants, scholarships, or investors, he cultivated an education born of persistence and necessity. The result of years of patient trial and error was a device that defied conventional wisdom. Simon created a phone that could make and receive calls without the need for a SIM card or mobile network. It functioned by transmitting voice signals through radio frequencies, similar in concept to walkie-talkies, yet refined to provide clarity and range suitable for everyday communication. This was not merely a gadget, but an innovation with potential to transform lives in rural communities where mainstream infrastructure is absent. The implications are profound. A child in a remote village could speak with a teacher in the capital without paying for airtime. Farmers could share market information without relying on costly operators. Families separated by poor infrastructure could remain in touch without fear of losing connection. Simon's invention is a metaphorical seed planted in the dry soil of exclusion, promising a harvest of inclusion and dignity. The journey was not smooth. Simon faced repeated failures, with burnt circuits, collapsed prototypes, and voices of doubt surrounding him. Yet his determination never faltered. In his late 20s, he refined his creation and presented it at a national science fair in Namibia. The demonstration captured the imagination of everyone present. What appeared to be an ordinary box of wires suddenly spoke with human voice, bridging a gap long considered insurmountable. The judges awarded Simon first place, and news spread rapidly through Namibia and beyond. It was a story that challenged the narrative of dependency and highlighted the hidden reservoirs of talent within Africa. However, as history has often shown, recognition does not guarantee protection. The invention may represent liberation, but it also risks drawing the attention of those who profit from the existing order. The question lingers: will Simon's achievement blossom into a revolution, or will it be crushed by forces determined to maintain control? The climax of Simon Petrus's story unfolded under the lights of the Namibian National Science Fair. Before an audience of skeptical scientists, educators, and officials, Simon revealed what seemed to be an unimpressive box of wires. The murmurs in the hall suggested disbelief. Yet when he initiated the call, and a clear human voice responded from across the distance, silence spread like a wave. For a brief moment, the room held its breath, and then erupted in applause. It was a victory not only for Simon, but also for the countless rural communities that had been forgotten by telecommunications monopolies. News outlets seized upon the story with zeal. National newspapers hailed him as a pioneer, while television channels replayed the demonstration, marveling at how simplicity had triumphed over entrenched corporate models. Game changer became the word of choice, appearing in headlines and social media posts across the country. For many Namibians, Simon symbolized dignity restored, proof that homegrown innovation could rival the products of wealthy laboratories abroad. Among citizens, pride mingled with astonishment. Young students proclaimed they wanted to be inventors too. Farmers envisioned a future in which they could negotiate prices and organize markets without paying exorbitant fees. Families in isolated villages imagined speaking to relatives without waiting for unreliable signals. The narrative of exclusion began to shift towards one of possibility. Yet alongside admiration came unease. Industry observers speculated whether large telecommunications companies would view Simon's device as a threat to their profits. Could corporate pressure stifle its development? Would government regulators align with citizens or with established firms that generated significant tax revenue? The excitement carried with it the shadow of potential suppression. On social platforms, slogans emerged. If one Simon exists in Namibia, many more exist across Africa. Such statements carried a revolutionary undertone, positioning Simon's work not as an isolated success, but as the beginning of a continental awakening. For some, it echoed earlier moments in history, when African contributions were overlooked or appropriated by outsiders. The invention thus acquired symbolic weight, embodying resistance to exploitation and faith in self-reliance. The crowd's standing ovation at the science fair marked the height of recognition, but beyond the applause loomed larger questions. Would this surge of attention translate into sustained support or dissolve once the novelty faded? In the immediate aftermath of Simon Petrus's triumph, the civil mood in Namibia shifted palpably. For communities long excluded from reliable communication, his invention symbolized hope. Villages with no towers or networks envisioned classrooms where teachers could call in lessons, clinics where health workers could summon assistance, and households where distance no longer dictated silence. Pride in national identity blossomed as ordinary citizens realized that ingenuity could spring from their own soil rather than from foreign capitals. In the medium term, however, the consequences extended beyond daily convenience into the political realm. Communication is power, and when rural citizens gain new channels of interaction, governments must respond. Increased connectivity would allow previously marginalized groups to coordinate, to demand services, and to participate in national debates with renewed vigor. While this democratizes opportunity, it also unsettles entrenched structures of authority. Officials accustomed to top-down control may view such empowerment with suspicion. Economic dimensions quickly surfaced as well. Telecommunications firms provide substantial tax revenue and wield considerable influence. A device that bypasses SIM cards and airtime threatens established revenue streams. Policymakers stand at a crossroads. Should they champion a local inventor whose work could foster inclusion? Or should they protect an industry that contributes to the state treasury? The decision carries implications for investment climates and public trust alike. Security agencies also confronted dilemmas. A network-free communication system enables ordinary people, yet it complicates surveillance and monitoring. Governments everywhere rely on traceable communication for law enforcement and national defense. Balancing civil freedom with security oversight becomes increasingly challenging when innovation leaps ahead of regulation. As debates spread, neighboring countries began to take notice. Regional media outlets speculated about the potential expansion of Simon's invention. In particular, discussions often compared scenarios with developments reported in Mozambique news, asking whether widespread adoption in adjacent nations could redraw the communications map of southern Africa. The story was no longer confined to Namibia. It had become a regional question of sovereignty, economics, and collective identity. The invention's broader trajectory now hangs in uncertainty. Will it be nurtured as a seed of empowerment or constrained by fears of disruption? The answer may determine whether Namibia sets an example of independence or becomes another case study in lost opportunity. As the story of Simon Petrus spread beyond Namibia's borders, international organizations and governments responded with mixed tones of admiration and caution. The African Union praised the invention as tangible evidence that the continent was capable of generating original technologies rather than merely consuming them. Within the Southern African development community, ministers discussed potential pilot projects, while some policymakers urged the establishment of regional patent protections to safeguard the device from exploitation. In Europe, the reaction was more nuanced. The European Union expressed interest in providing technical support and research funding, but critics questioned whether such offers might carry conditions that risk diluting African ownership. Analysts drew parallels with previous episodes in which local innovations were absorbed into foreign systems, erasing their origins. The lesson of history loomed heavily over the conversation. The United States monitored developments carefully. Major newspapers ran features describing Simon as a self-taught engineer with disruptive potential. At the same time, commentators pointed out that powerful American corporations would view the bypassing of networks and SIM cards as a challenge to existing business models. The language was simultaneously admiring and wary, a sign of both opportunity and threat. Amid these competing narratives, one phrase emerged repeatedly in commentary: Africa today. The emphasis was clear. The story was not merely about the past or the future. It was about the present reality of a continent determined to reclaim agency in technology and innovation. The lingering uncertainty remains. Will international attention nurture Simon's breakthrough or suffocate it under global interests? Looking forward, the invention of Simon Petrus presents both promise and peril. On the one hand, if protected through patents and supported by regional investment, it could be scaled to serve millions. Schools in remote settlements could become connected classrooms. Farmers could coordinate markets, and families could weave tighter bonds. Such outcomes would mark a step towards technological sovereignty, reinforcing dignity and inclusion across the continent. On the other hand, the risks are undeniable. Without clear legal safeguards, the device could be purchased cheaply by foreign corporations, rebranded, and sold back to Africa at inflated prices. History provides many warnings of this pattern, and the possibility of repetition is real. Moreover, entrenched business interests may resist adoption, lobbying governments to restrict or regulate the technology in ways that protect profits rather than communities. For the youth of Africa, Simon's story is both an inspiration and a responsibility. It demonstrates that innovation is possible even without formal laboratories, but it also highlights the necessity of vigilance to preserve ownership. Collective action, regional solidarity, and transparent policy frameworks will determine whether the spark he has ignited becomes a beacon or fades into memory. The image is clear. A dusty village path leading to school could be transformed into a highway of information if this innovation receives the support it deserves. Yet the path is still fragile, and the direction depends on decisions made now. The pressing question remains: will Africa embrace this chance to chart its own technological destiny? The journey of Simon Petrus demonstrates that innovation can arise from the most unlikely of places. A modest room filled with discarded parts produced a device that challenges multinational corporations and redefines what communication in Africa might look like. His story is not only about technology, but also about dignity, courage, and the refusal to accept exclusion as permanent. Each call made without a SIM card carries the weight of a continent's determination to speak in its own voice. Yet the struggle is far from over. History warns of ideas stolen, names erased, and communities left unrewarded. The international spotlight shines brightly, but it can just as easily blind. The real test will be whether Namibia and its neighbors protect Simon's creation as an African achievement, not a commodity for external appropriation. Regional media, including Mozambique News, have highlighted the stakes of this moment, echoing the urgency for safeguards and collaboration. If nurtured, the story can symbolize not only national pride, but continental renewal. It is a reflection of Africa today, where innovation grows from the ground up and where citizens demand recognition for their own ingenuity. The question is clear: will we allow Mozambique news and headlines across Africa to record another loss? Or will they celebrate a lasting victory for self-determination?